Welcome, everybody. Yay, Lauren. What's up? How are you?
I'm good. Dee, how are you?
I'm really good. It's good to see you again. It's only been, an hour? So I am so glad that you and I have been invited officially, and our audience has been invited to the cookout with Chad and Dad. Yes. Oh my goodness. So you all know us, hopefully, if you're here, and hopefully not only do you know us from our online presence, but you know us from coming to visit us in our book space, which we so lovingly call it because that's what you all make it. We are here together in this space now, online community, to share a little bit more with some new people to the PGR community, which Lauren here will so graciously introduce.
Yes, we're super excited to have this beautiful book featured here tonight, Family Reunion by Chad and Dad Richardson.
Chad and Dad, yes.
And Dad does have a name, but he's often known as Dad. His name is Charles.
Been like Dad to us all week, right?
We've read this book many times and we love it, and we're so excited to kind of share it with all of you and give those of you who are watching the chance to hear from our guests about the book, about their writing process, about their upcoming projects. So without further ado, we want to introduce Chad and Charles. So Chad and Charles are two parts of a father-son powerhouse writing duo. Chad is a University of Cincinnati graduate, professional copywriter by day, a superhero probably by night, but I probably wasn't supposed to say that, right, Chad? Has his own freelance copywriting company, lives in Columbus, Ohio, and Dad, Charles, is a college professor of management and marketing and also lives in Ohio in Liberty Township. And I kind of, we're really excited to get to know both of you a little bit just through conversation about this book. We feel like we know you a bit from having read it. Is there anything else that you want to say about yourselves? Or maybe, I'm afraid to do this, having interacted with you before, or about each other?
They're a family that likes to have fun. Go ahead and have at it.
That's already evident to us. So is there anything, though, that you do feel like you want those folks who are watching to know about you that feels like relevant to the conversation tonight? Please feel free right now to share it with us.
Dad, you want to go first?
I guess I will. Probably, as you can see already, I'm the better looking one of the two. Okay. And you can't see that I'm the smarter of the two. Okay. And that's just been proven time and time again. So that's all I want to share right now. So go ahead, Chad, you can jump in there.
Subtle, Dad.
Yeah, the smarter one of the two with less hair. You kind of got the George Jefferson going on here, but
okay, Chad.
We'll leave that alone for now.
Okay.
Inverse relationship between hair and brain power is what we're hearing. We don't buy it. We know you're both brilliant. So, maybe just to kind of get us started, could you tell us a little bit? We've obviously read this book, and you're going to tell us about it, where it comes from, why you wrote it, for people who maybe haven't interacted with it already. Give them enough of a sense of it so that they know what it is and what it's about. Beautiful book for children.
You want to go first? Or?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. And what I'll do is I'll kind of tell you how we got kind of started writing in general. It was a few years ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago, my sister, who is a retired English teacher. And by the way, I not only have one, but I have two ugly sisters. And then to be fair, it goes ugly sister, idiot brother, ugly sister.
Get us in trouble. I'm not trying to laugh at that.
And then, so she's a retired English teacher, and she had posted a meme on social media about how there were very few protagonists of color in children's literature. And so I went to Chad and said, "Hey, Chad, tell me a book that you like that had a African American character." And he said, "Bud Not Buddy." I said, well, give me another example that you've read. And he went, Bud Not Buddy. So it was ironic how, even though it had gotten better from when he grew up in the late 90s and early 2000s, it really wasn't a whole lot different when I grew up in the 70s in terms of really not having a lot of, books that kids can read, boys that had folks that looked like them. And so then we decided to go ahead and do our part to hopefully kind of solve that problem by writing books that kids who look like us can see themselves in books, and also can relate to our experiences. Both Chad and I, growing up, probably were reluctant readers. We're more likely to go out and, play sports than to read books. And we know how important, reading is. We come to read more now that we are older. And so we want to kind of make that connection with kids earlier on in hopefully get them to read and get excited about reading when they are kids. So now that being said, I will turn it over to Chad.
Okay, so I'll speak a little bit to basically what the book is about. So essentially, the book is about a young kid. He really doesn't want to go to his family reunion, and I feel like we can kind of all relate to that. When you're younger, there are a lot of things your parents kind of have to drag you to, and it's kind of like oh, do I really have to go? But he reluctantly goes, and in the end, he has a great time. He bonds with family. He learns about his, family's history, their tradition. And so by the end of the book, he really just can't even wait to go back. And, I can kind of, talk to my personal experience, the family reunion, some of the things that, I personally like were things like the barbecue. We would have, a family meeting every time where they would talk about the laws and the different things. And it kind of, sometimes it put me to sleep, but, those are the kind of, memories that I have and some of the things that I cherish when I look back on, the family reunions that I've been to.
So would you say, Chad, that the book, the first little character that we meet here, that this is based on you? Not interested in going, not interested in, but I gotta give you credit because in the illustrations, I really liked that the long ride in the car included the reading of books. Mm-hmm. For some children that's the norm. For some children they gravitate to electronics, and we want to encourage children to stick to reading.
Yeah, admittedly for me, the picture where he's kind of on the bed, playing his video game, his Game Boy. Mm-hmm. I'll be honest, that was probably more me growing up.
Yeah.
Game Boy was attached to my hip, so yeah. So
my son is just like that. So I think that this book is, so I bought this and gifted it to him recently, and he read it and loved it. And we recently went and visited family, and it wasn't a family reunion. But my children haven't even actually experienced going yet to a family reunion. And I really do admire families that do it and do it every year, or committed to getting together with family. There's not a whole lot of longevity necessarily in my family. And so getting together to make sure that children know their people is really important. Can you talk a little bit about like what your experience was as a young person transitioning from not really wanting to go to getting there and actually having a good time, and like how that's reflected in the book here?
I think that, as anything in life, as much as I will hate to admit this, your parents are oftentimes right. When you're little, yeah. It's kind of like, I think that, the older I've gotten, the more of an importance I've kind of, placed on family and, surrounding yourself with those people, who have been there for you since the beginning. So I really feel like that's kind of just, with age comes, you become more wise. So
now, here's one thing I kind of, if I can jump in here, that I do want to mention that the book was illustrated by Ashleigh Corrin, who was a very, very talented artist, as you can see.
Amazing.
Yeah,
amazing.
We love her work.
She was the 2020 Ezra Jack Keats Award winner. And just this spread here alone, which gives you a different view of that overview looking down, which is kind of different that you don't really see normally in picture books, right? And it's funny because typically when you go through the writing process, editors try to keep the illustrator and the writer apart, because really as an illustrator, they want the words and then let them do their work. But we actually had a chance to talk to Ashleigh one time to kind of give a perspective on some things we thought about. And it was amazing of her interpretation of our manuscript and how she kind of brought those words to life. Again, that's a great one. There's another spread here where it's Chad, not Chad, the character Aaron, who is with his grandfather. And
Pop, right?
Pop. And Chad, you want to talk a little bit about that one?
Pop,
Yeah,
little man.
I can draw on personal experience for this spread. Somehow, somehow money always found its way into my pocket whenever he was around. So that was really, the inspiration for that.
I love this illustration of Pop too.
Yeah,
so sweet.
And the one thing, this was, my father. This was my father-in-law in terms of, because I have 2 kids. Okay, I have 2 nieces and a nephew, and I love my kids a lot. But my dad was so obnoxious about how great his grandkids were. I wanted to throw up, but that's who he was. Thinking that his grandkids could walk on water. And the other thing about my dad is his head was so flat, you could put a glass of water on it and it wouldn't spill. But anyway, that's a different point.
But that is what children need. They need to know that they have a cheerleader, and who's better than Pop? When you're a little kid and trying to figure out where you fit into the family structure and who's connected to who, and I think Pops are so important.
You're right. In that illustration, really kind of served as a transition of this character Aaron not wanting to go and not feeling good about things. And all of a sudden, it started to feel a little more comfortable because now things are okay because now he has his Pop there who he knows and is familiar with.
Yeah, he made him feel it seems to me like a sense of stability and comfort and connection and welcoming, and one of the things that your illustrator does mention in here is that in the back area where you explained a little bit more about your perspectives, where she talks about how each skin tone was thought through and was very intentional, and I just thought that was so beautiful. Anytime that authors give space for the illustrator to also have a dedication, that there's a good relationship there. It would seem to me that was my assumption. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because she does seem to be a really dynamic artist and just person in general. Your visions and your experiences are very much aligned, it seems. So that's so good that you guys came together and did this. So
it's really special. We love the book Layla's Happiness, which was the one that was kind of the source of that amazing award. And then we're also just really excited to sort of shout out a young person who has a debut children's book coming out. Her name is Gwendolyn Maya Wallace, and Ashleigh Corrin is going to be the illustrator of her first book as well. And so that's just a really fun, she's somebody who's a native, kind of a local Connecticut young person writing with, I think, a lot of the same motivation that both of you talked about at the start, about really wanting to create books that are, representative of the young people who are there waiting for them, right? Asking for them and sometimes not finding them. So it's just a really beautiful pairing.
I have a question too about so we know that Pop is in the story, and this is directly connected to your father, right, Mr. Richardson?
You can call me Charles. Mr. Richardson would be that'd be my brother. So if he's behind me, he's not. Yeah,
Did I scare? I'm sorry. Did I scare you for a second? Charles. So
yes.
Charles, we know that Pop is your dad. Are any of the other characters like, where since you did have a chance to talk to your illustrator, is there anybody? So I'm assuming that Uncle's Ribs is your brother, Mr. Richardson. Is that right?
Oh no.
No.
Okay.
No.
Is
You wouldn't want
any
my
other
brother
character based on a real relationship?
You wouldn't want my brother near a grill. He might set himself in a house on fire. Even though he supposedly has a genius IQ, I haven't seen it. But anyway, it's really based off of more so like cousins at the reunion who would do the cooking and who could, do a great job with that. There is one spread in there that I do want to talk about that had a couple of different inspirations, where it's the dance off that happens in there.
Yep.
And that for many families, dancing is a big part of many families. And there were two inspirations for this. One was when we had a reunion in Cincinnati, and every time we did this, we'd have a boat ride down the Ohio River. And so one year they had like a fashion show. And the last two people who walked down were cousin Eldora and my uncle Vernon. And they were they were dressed to the T's. They were looking good and they knew it. So they didn't walk down the walkway. They kind of strutted. Okay. So that was kind of one inspiration. The other inspiration was years ago, I might have been a teenager, and my mom's side of the family had a gathering, and my mom and dad were there, and they were dancing. So as a teenager, you don't want to see your parents dance. It's just kind of gross. So anyway, I remember Pop dancing, and he was dancing like this. Okay, and he was moving in a small circle. And then my mom was like dancing around him in a larger circle, like she was dancing on hot coals. Okay. So that was kind of the inspiration for that book. But the point is that different families have, in this case, different traditions. Mm-hmm. I know with my wife's family, they get together usually, 3 or 4 times a year. They live in this area, the Ohio, Cincinnati, Dayton, Columbus area. Mm-hmm. And they get together. They always start off by, breaking bread. And at some point in time, someone's going to walk by a piano, hit a key, and then her family will flock to that piano like bees to honey. But that's part of their tradition. The other side of my wife's family, they would always get together. So Mr. Bowles' brothers and sister would get together for Mother's Day. And that was their tradition. So part of this book was to talk about different traditions that you want to kind of pass down to that next generation, because that's a way that people, who are beyond 2 generations will continue to live, in the minds of family members.
That's very true. I completely agree with this. Do you have it? Do you participate in the organization of your family reunion?
Yeah, we're curious. Do
you help to get all the family there, or do you guys just show up and make
or you do the comedy
time?
act? Are you the comedy routine?
That's really the hard part for families, is taking on ownership and responsibility for organizing everybody to get there. And in times like this, especially COVID going on and just unprecedented illnesses or things that are scary going on in different regions of the country. What do you think about that piece? Has that affected your family at all?
Luckily, for us, we're actually fairly organized. So we have officers that stay in office for a couple of years. Yeah. They will organize our reunions. We have a host committee that will do a lot of the legwork at the different locations. Now, the last 2 years, so we've met face-to-face since 1975. And last year was the first year we couldn't meet face-to-face because of COVID. But we still met. We met via Zoom. So Zoom was a great tool
good for you guys
to be able to meet. And you know what? And they were cutting up on Zoom.
Did you dance?
That's beautiful.
Like it was face-to-face. No dancing there.
You didn't do the
and then this year, they did the same thing, via Zoom. Now, next year, real excited. We're going to go back to where it all started, which was in Dalton, Georgia, and meet face to face, because we're confident that we'll be past COVID at that point in time.
That's
And
wonderful.
can you give just folks who are listening, because I do want to shout out some people who I know are here and watching. So Jackie, it's always wonderful to have you on board. Jesse Turner, who is our friend who runs the Central Connecticut State University's Literacy Center and has a beautiful collection of children's books there and is saying, you know, save my copies. Delores and Lauren, we got you. Jesse, we got you. And Liz Johnston, right, amazing educator in New Haven Public Schools. Hey, y'all. So it's so great to have you here and to be like a small little piece of connective tissue between you and this amazing family, this duo here. So just for people who don't know you, I feel like I saw an image and it was maybe on the publisher's website of your family reunion, and it like, I don't know that everybody's family reunion, right, looks that quite like that. And
robust.
I mean, it was, oh yeah, like you were like, they were like 100 people deep. Like,
that's beautiful. How do you keep your family so?
Yeah. Oh, there it is. Look at that.
That's amazing. All love, man. That is love.
That is amazing.
Beautiful.
Yeah, you know, we just, I mean, because we meet every year, and we have folks who are organizing it, and, you know, we keep those connections, not just during the reunion, but throughout the year. You know, you can say what you want about Facebook and some of the down parts, but it also allows you to stay connected to your family. And because of things like this, and again, we had a strong base. You know, there were the brothers and sisters and first cousins, you know, of the HPRS family. They kind of kept us going and kept us strong. But then part of that picture, admittedly, is I know there are a lot of people there, but the reason there is a kind of lot of depth and width is because we like to eat. And so we have some depth and width to us. Okay, so that's kind of why that is.
I love that.
I was speaking about numbers, but I also love a family. I love a family. I love a family that can cook and a family that can eat. And like, you know, food. I mean, food is right. It's so central to like bringing people together and experiencing joy, and also like passing along tradition.
Absolutely. And your spirituality, you see at the end of the book, you know, the family is in church, praising the Lord. Sunday, you know, keeping spirituality at the center of your family. Is that big for you all?
You know, our saying is the family that prays together stays together. Mm-hmm. You know, we had a cousin, he passed away a few years ago, who was a minister, and he would always, you know, do the Sunday sermon if possible. Now I have another cousin who does it, but just having it there it was always important. So it's always been a big part of who our family is. The joke was that when we went down to Dalton, Georgia, we actually would probably increase their congregation by 100% because we filled half the church. We were in the church for the Sunday sermon. So again, that's always been a big part of who we are, our family. We continue to do it, and it is like many African American Black families. It's a big part of what we do. Now, Chad, why don't you talk about the food part?
The food. I mean, I can eat it, but you know, admittedly, I would put my dad's ribs up against anybody's ribs in America. I mean, my dad honestly is a great cook. Yeah, his barbecue. I've always said if I had one meal for the rest of my life, it'd probably be my dad's barbecue. So
what did y'all do for the Zoom family reunion? What did you eat?
Well, we didn't.
We did your ribs just for your family.
Well, that's cruel.
I don't cook. I mean, I cook ribs for my family. I don't do it as a large group because if you ask me, I would tell you that Pop's ribs are the best ribs, kind of thing. But I do have some cousins that can fry the fish and cook up, you know, different food like you wouldn't know it. Type of thing. But again, I mean, food's a big part of what we do. I mean, there are many times when you would, you know, had to push away from the table and loosen a belt buckle a notch or two because you ate too much food. And then after that, you took the leftover foods and you put it in the hospitality suite, and then you came back later on that night and you ate more, and you had more, you know, fellowship and clowning going on even after you had the session picnic on Saturday.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How does your family feel about this book that's now out kind of in the world from you all that that sort of, at least in the abstract somewhat, like represents your family tradition. What's that been like?
Chad?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think we've gotten questions on, is this person me, or who is it? Things like that. So, kind of, yeah, we just got a lot of questions like that. So,
Okay.
But it's been the wildest thing, really, which kind of makes me feel uncomfortable, is when you have a relative who you know all your life say, "Hey, can you autograph a book for me?" I'm like, well, "Why? You know me," kind of thing. But so you get a little of that. But one of the things that my family's done that I do appreciate, and this is something that I told them, is, "Hey, listen, what Chad and I did, for our advance, and I don't know how many authors do this, is that we really chose not to take our advance in terms of dollars and cents. We said, pay us back in books." Because one of the things we want to do is we want to now donate those books to different schools who maybe don't have books otherwise. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I worked out with my family is that, hey, listen, if you go ahead and pay full price for a book, okay, we'll go ahead and donate a book in your name to a organization or school. For example, I went to school with a classmate. I'm originally from Xenia, Ohio. I have a classmate who's doing some really great things with the homeless up in Columbus, Ohio. And I hit him up on my Facebook and said, "Hey, listen, I have some books here. Can you use them?" He said, "Oh, absolutely. I'll give them to some of the homeless kids up here in Columbus." And on a kind of connected note to this, so we went up there to drop the books off. Chad and I did about a month or so ago. When we got out of our car, there was a boy, maybe 5 or 6, who was approaching us, and his sister, who was probably 7 or 8. And they came and said, "Hey, do you want to buy a flower?" And I said, "Well, no." I reached in my pocket, and it was like for $1. So I gave them $1. I said, "Hey, you keep this. You keep the flower." Mm-hmm. But then I gave them a book, okay? And you would have thought it was Christmas time when I gave them this book. Her eyes got this big, excited with getting that book. And so we went in and we talked to my friend a little bit, and we came back out, and I saw, the brother and sister over in the distance, and the little girl was walking, and she still had the book, and she was clutching it like this. Okay. And so, I mean, our goal really is to hopefully get kids to be able to connect to reading, connect the books like that. Okay. So, for us, again, don't get me wrong. I like money. Chad likes money, but we're trying to do some things a little larger than that to really get kids to kind of fall in love with reading. Hopefully, a little quicker and sooner than what Chad and I did as kids.
Well, that commitment, I think, and that foregrounding of sort of writing as craft and the creation of books as also service and connecting young people to books as a way of serving young people, serving community, really resonates. I'm seeing, we have wonderful folks in the kind of chat and comments, like Liz, who is a real connector of people in books here locally in New Haven. And so that's such a beautiful practice that you're all engaged in. And it's just another really lovely synergy. And it feels really great to be in conversation with you. I'm curious, I don't want to switch the topic, but I'm super curious just to hear, I know this is your first book together, and collaboration is complicated. And I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about your process, in terms of writing for kids. What was that actually like for you two to actually get together and sit down and work on a book collaboratively?
I'll start first. In the first thing we have to do really is get past my son making fun of me. Okay, so for example, you see my hairline. Can you see that?
It's barely visible.
We can.
Hard.
That reminds me of my dad.
He calls it the bat signal. Okay, my hairline. Even though he has
superheroes. I did say superheroes earlier. By night, writers by day.
That's right.
Superheroes by night.
Now, he has an apartment in Columbus, but right now I'm upstairs. He's downstairs. He's eating the food in my house. So he comes in my office today. I'm working. I'm not bothering him. Okay, I'm working. He comes in and says, "Dad, have you lost more hair since last time I saw you?" I'm seeing a whole much more forehead than I saw before. Okay, so once we get past those types of things, okay, I will tell you that I'm the hack and Chad is the talent. Okay, our process is kind of evolving over time, but what we kind of do, we kind of fell into this, is that we will kind of meet to talk about some ideas, and sometimes we'll get into more details than others, and then I go off and I'll take the first crack at doing a draft, okay, and then I get so far with it, and then literally what I would do, and this is why I say to my son a lot, I will give it to him and say, hey, Chad, now you work your magic. Okay, because Chad's the one that, and I'll give him credit for this, that going back to when he was, in high school, he's just a very gifted and talented writer. I can put words on a page, but he can make them come to life. So the way I look at it, which is a little different, because as a father, you used to call the shots. Yes, no, maybe. Okay. In this case, I clearly looked at him to say, hey, Chad, if you say yes, no, left, right, that's what it's going to be, because he's the one that has the insight into how to make these things kind of come to life.
That's beautiful. You must be employing a lot of your just teaching skills in terms of like elevating his talent in the way that you just described. And you're also, did you always want to write a book as a kid? Like, Charles, did you have the dream of writing when you were Chad's age or younger, or?
No, I wasn't one of those folks who grew up thinking like, I think I'll be a writer or I'll write a book. It just really kind of came out from that graphic that my sister showed me that kind of got me motivated to start to write. And then once you do it, you kind of catch that bug, because now all of a sudden you have a story that you can tell, and hopefully you'll impact, a kid to get them to think about not only reading books, but also writing stories themselves.
Absolutely. What do your friends think about you as an author, Chad?
Well, I've always been into writing. That's been something I've done. As my dad said, growing up in high school, I actually started out as a journalism major. So, they were kind of surprised, like a children's book, because obviously I write in freelance writing, like health and fitness articles and things like that. And, it was kind of like a different side that, maybe they, hadn't maybe seen before. So it was kind of cool to, kind of, be like, wow, Chad, I didn't know that, you kind of had this side, your family's huge, your family's great, or whatever. So, it's been.
What do you think is the talent that your father is seeing in you? Like when he says you're the talent, what does that mean to you, Chad?
What does it mean to me? I'm just really, I think, just as a writer and as a person, kind of just really diligent when it comes to, writing. Sometimes it's a curse. You can look at it as a blessing or a curse. Sometimes, like, I'm not the type of person, I can't just move on. Like if I start a project, I have to get the intro, the body, and the conclusion. I can't just, move on to anything else. So I would just say really just being a perfectionist, really being diligent, meticulous, with my work, and just, not settling for anything less than my best, giving 110% every time.
It's funny. I'll tell a little side story. When Chad was in high school, he had to write some creative paper, and he said, I'm going to go write it. And he came into the office and he sat down. He was in there probably for a good hour. And he said, hey, Dad, come, I want you to come read what I've written so far. And I walked in there, and on the page, he had like a sentence. So he had been there for like an hour, and he had written a sentence. Because his philosophy is that, if you can get that first sentence right, if you can get that first paragraph right, then everything else will flow from there. He said, all the rest of it won't be hard at all, Dad. I'll get that done in a minute. But that kind of talks to what he just mentioned there, is just his perfection to want to have those lines just right. He'll tell you now, there are parts of the family reunion manuscript that he's still not happy with. It's just not quite right. But we moved on.
A true artist would feel that
absolutely.
way. Yeah, a true artist would feel that way. That makes a lot of sense. What type of student were you, Chad? Because you guys missed it. I tried to get my son to actually show his face. He can't hear that I'm on a show, but he can see, and he was like, can I go to my friend's house? And I'm like literally working right now. But so for me, as a mom of a young Black boy, and just parents out there who, with children in school right now, teachers who are encouraging their students, what would you say was a skill that you had to hone in school that made it possible for you to be a successful author today? What was the thing you had to do in school? Did you have to read a lot? Like, what was your thing that helped develop that talent that your father speaks about, the diligence, the habit? What was the habit that you built?
So for me, and I think my situation was a little bit different. I was really into sports growing up, and I kind of just feel like the discipline that I kind of got from being in sports kind of, enabled me, and it kind of carried into other aspects of my life. So really kind of just, setting goals and, being able to stick to them. And, if I was going to talk to somebody, younger than me, I would kind of just say, don't start too big, start small. I have a personal philosophy, even small steps add up to a whole mile eventually. So
I love it.
So
yeah,
say that again.
Even small steps add up to a whole mile eventually. So
you heard it here first. That's maybe a great next or future book. I mean, for young people, I'm just saying, I think like what an amazing message in so many ways. And I think it's like just building that perseverance. And I actually love too that you kind of, it's like where we learn is school, but it's also in these other community spaces and sports spaces where we like build those habits. And I think a lot of people think that writing children's books is probably easy because there aren't that many words on the page, but this idea of like, actually sometimes when less is more, you have to put even more into the less in order to have it like carry all the meaning that you want it to. And so it's a really wonderful message. And it's also one that I think like shows up in Family Reunion in its own way by like all the care and time and meticulousness that kind of comes across even in a book that, like, if you counted the words, there, on the whole, there aren't probably that many, and yet they're very important.
And I think what's different about Family Reunion, and some people may not know this, it's actually written in a haiku format, so 575 in terms of syllables. So that did add another level of difficulty to it to really stick to that format. So
yeah. If when your father says that you're probably not satisfied with it, what does he mean? What aren't you satisfied with, or what would you do more of, less of, or next? What would you do next?
I don't think it's necessarily any one thing in particular. It's kind of just really just kind of understanding that you gave your best effort. You could work till the cows come home. It may not be exactly what you want, but just giving 110%, I just feel like I'm just really just never satisfied. Like I said, it's a blessing or a curse sometimes, but.
Who is that? Who do you take after? Did he get that from you, Charles?
No.
I would say that's definitely more my mom. She's like me in that aspect. Yep.
So she's okay. What's your mom's name?
Carla.
Okay.
But what do you call her, Chad?
What do I call her?
You call her Sarge.
Oh yeah.
I love women like that. Dang. I wish she came to the call.
That's for sure.
She's in this book, isn't she? I know she's in here somewhere. Yeah. So Charles, what advice do you have for parents like me who need to like build that academic muscle in their child, or just build the book joy, or for some families, I'll just provide a little bit more context. To get father and son to work on a project together like this is like maybe not even heard of, or wouldn't be really like possible for some father-son relationships. Were you really intentional about the relationship that you built with your child from birth? Or is it something that was cultivated just based on the personality that emerged from your child?
Well, first of all, I grew up with a model of my father and my mother in terms of relationships. But I kind of let me kind of tell you that how I got the nickname Dad is that when Chad was first born, I was in graduate school, and so I jokingly introduced myself one time as Chad's dad, and that kind of stuck with people there in graduate school, because I was over the top in terms of excited about being a father. It was a couple years ago when Chad was probably 10 or 12. I remember we were I want to say at a funeral for my wife's side of the family. And one of her uncles came up and he had been watching us apparently. And he came up and he was shaking his finger and kind of pointing back to both of us. And he said, "Hey, whatever you do, don't lose that. Don't lose that connection that you and your son apparently have with each other." And so I try to do that. Chad and I, if you put us in a room, we will talk about sports until you have just cereal coming out of your ears, kind of thing. With my daughter is my bookstore buddy. So I try to cultivate that in both
Yeah.
of my both my kids. And so in doing that, it just kind of, I think, because I had the model of my dad. And also my mother, it was kind of natural, to have that translate to my son too.
I love that picture.
So
So can I ask, I know from your website, and I did see that you two have a Chad Dad Richardson website that we can drop in our communication about the episode and stuff like that. That you're also like offering or interested in doing school visits, and I do just think like when you're talking about the model that you had. And this is not to assume anyone like doesn't have models, but I think the model you provide is also a really special one. This the relationship that you have, the way you're able to jab at each other, but also clearly able to like buckle down and get and accomplish like a task, which really writing a book is. Can you say a little bit about any sort of events you've done or you'd hope to be doing with schools or with groups so that you're like actually taking your model to the people?
Yeah, so we actually have a couple of events coming up here in September. So we'll be visiting a school in Indianapolis, which is about 2 hours away from us. We'll go in and we're going to do an event. It'll be more of a reading, for basically kids K through 6, I believe. And that's part of what we want to do. We want to reach out and do more of those things. We're also going to meet with some librarians to kind of give them more perspective behind why we wrote the book. The hope will give them perspective. So when kids come into the library, they kind of say, "Here's a good book," and let me kind of give you some background to that. But that is our goal. I as you know, I'm a social professor of all things of business at Sinclair Community College in the Dayton, Ohio area, and I don't teach English. But I like the idea of teaching. So hopefully we'll be able to do a lot of that, just kind of connecting with the kids. Again, I mean, it really comes down to that basic idea of that, reading is fundamental and reading is fun. The one thing that I find, I don't want to say pride in, but that my grandfather, my mother's mother, could not read or write. He signed his name with an X. But then from what I've heard is you couldn't find a better man. My mom would say she would wake up during the Depression and she'd find someone strange sleeping on their floor, because my grandmother and my grandfather said, "Hey, if you need a place to stay, you need a hot meal, you can kind of come here and then we'll help you out to get you back on your feet a little bit." Okay. Again, to now see that we've written a book is something that I think, me personally, is just kind of special.
Wow, that's huge.
Amazing.
That is really huge. My father was our family genealogist, and he has some of those records too. And it is your ancestors' wildest dreams in some ways, like being able to not only read and write, but to provide literacy to all over the world, potentially, and that's super dope. I love it. Oh, wow. So is there anything I'm sorry, Lauren, were you done with your question?
Yeah,
Or,
no, I mean, that was amazing to hear. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you going to do another one?
If I can get him to sit in a chair long enough to review some things I've written, we'll be good to go. No, we probably have maybe 4 or 5 different picture books in different stages of development. We are working on a hopefully a chapter book series that would be like a time travel series. So having a kid and his friend who goes back in time and interacts with different history events or different folks in history. We're probably about 75-80% done on a draft on a middle grade novel. And one of the things that I think that we are is it intentionally doing is that our books will focus on a couple of different themes. So we'll focus on a family, which is obviously evident in this first book we did, which is very important to the African American community. If you need help, where can you turn? You can turn to your cousins, you can turn to your aunts, you can turn to your uncles. Friends also will be prominently displayed in our books. And the last thing we want to focus on is just Black joy. So kids being kids. So in this middle grade novel, it's kind of loosely based off of Chad and his friends from one of his best friends from growing up, and then also loosely based on Chad's cousin. And we'll just say that they're kind of by themselves and they kind of get in a little bit of trouble. Again, that's something that's in development. Hopefully, as you know, in the writing business, that you can have a great idea and write it because the best thing is to slice bread, but then you might not get a publisher to pick it up. Because we were fortunate that, with Barefoot Books that published the Family Reunion and working with an outstanding editor in Kate DePalma to kind of get that thing done and get it out to in the marketplace.
So what made you an unreluctant reader? Like, what made you switch gears, I guess, in a sense, in your love, in your confidence, and go towards reading more? I guess I'm assuming you read more. It's
like I would read more nonfiction type of things. Because it is interesting, because my aunt used to tell my mom that she had 3 house cats and 1 alley cat, because my 2 sisters and my brother, they would devour books, and I didn't so much. But then as I got older, I really kind of had that vision, or had that exposure to my brothers and sisters reading, that I got more involved in reading. My wife's a big reader. My daughter is a big reader. So it's just one of those things that as you find something that you can relate to and gravitate toward, I think you'd be more likely to read.
That's the foundation. Those words are like a foundation of what we kind of built our dreams on top of. Like, that's in our foundational beliefs and values at People Get Ready. This is just such an amazing example of the modeling that you're doing for folks during times like this, where a lot is happening in our country, a lot is happening in our communities. What's your best advice for people who want to take on work like this, and for people who are kind of just trying to survive the day-to-day struggle, like as a parent? What advice would you give folks who are trying to hold on to their joy, to continue to experience their joy, even though it doesn't always feel so joyful? And we're not at a time where we can necessarily readily see family as often. How do you stay together?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you don't want to make it bigger than what it is. Right around you have your family. It might not be easy like it had been in the past to be able to connect, but there are ways to connect. I know how many times I hop on Facebook and see posts, from my cousins, that are entertaining. Like I saw a post recently where I had one cousin who's down in on work. He's down in Panama, for his job. And, I have another cousin has these like lists when she posts of her thoughts for the day. I have one cousin, when he posts what he made for dinner, and he always ends it with "and a sensible salad" is how he ends it, right? But I mean, again, you can have issues with social media and some of the misinformation out there, and I believe that, right? But it also is a way of connecting with people and family members too during this tough and trying time. And again, I was fortunate that during this time that my brothers and sisters live in the area, so I could stay in contact with them. Chad, who was at the time was a financial analyst, he decided to kind of live with us during the pandemic. So he was here. My daughter was in graduate school, so we're able to kind of make those connections. And still, through talking on the telephone and those means, we're able to kind of stay connected.
Would you call yourself an optimist, Charles?
Okay, Chad, you go ahead and answer that question. What do you think about that? Is that an optimist?
Yeah, he definitely is. I can actually tell a personal story you might find funny. I ran track, back in the day and in high school. And I remember there was this one time that it just was not the track meet for me. I did long jump. And
me too.
Yeah. So, my dad was trying to be optimistic, and he would always tell me, your next jump is your best jump. And being a bratty teenager, and this is an exact quote that I told him, and this is really stupid. I said, if all you're going to be is positive, then I don't want to hear it at all. So he definitely, that was awful to say, but he's definitely an optimist.
We look back now, it was kind of funny.
Yeah, this is very stupid.
Did you ever have to recover from well, that's not really a disagreement at all, but from a real disagreement, how did you recover if you had one significant one that you can recall?
Dead.
I'm probably a little more when it comes to these things, as my wife says, you never apologize. And my son he's very good about, if he is in the wrong or he feels that what needs to be mended is an apology or to have that conversation to go on, he will do that. So I do appreciate that, because maybe that's one behavior that Dad didn't quite model like I would like to. And so I do appreciate when Chad does do that.
That's very big
so
of you
sweet.
To be able to say that. I love that. Oh,
So
you guys
sweet.
are such a shining example of family, fatherhood, and being a good son or an honorable son.
We are coming up on our final last minutes, and I do just want to ask you, Dee knows this about me. I was a teacher back in the early thousands, and Walter Dean Myers and Christopher Myers, I think of as a father-son collaborative team. They were everything to my students, and I really feel like you two are not just your ancestors' dreams, but their dreams. When I think about them writing about those New York Times op-eds they wrote years ago about the apartheid of children's literature, and just, it's so exciting to hear you talking about writing for middle grades. Not because, picture books are crucial too, and there are so many young boys who come into our space or whose parents come into our space or family members, and they're please help me get some books that my son actually will see himself in and really want to read. So it's thrilling. Thrilling that to hear that you have these projects in the works and in different stages. And I'm just wondering if you could, Dee asked you about words of encouragement or advice for kind of families. I'm asking a little bit, are there things you would say to people who are trying to break into writing for young people, and in particular writing for young people in ways that maybe we haven't had as much as we need previously? And what would you advise them? What just cheerleading might you offer? We already have every small step adds up to a mile. eventually, and that's so wonderful. But just, any other thoughts you would give them?
My best words of advice would be there's never going to be, an ideal or right time to get started. I think the biggest thing is actually just getting started. So just taking that first initial step and just realizing, you're going to come across bumps in the road along the way, but just realizing, keep pushing forward and you'll make it to your goal eventually.
Yeah, and kind of what I have is very similar to what Chad just said. The first one is you got to put your backside in the seat and just do it. Because what will happen as a young writer, he's getting started, you'll do all kind of research, you do everything but write. And so the only way you're going to get better is actually to write. And so I encourage people to kind of put their backside in the seat and just start writing. Whether you're doing it at the same time every day, whether you're doing it when it strikes you, you have to do it in order to get better. The other point is that you want to read. There's no way you can become a good writer if you don't read. I was thinking about a picture book, and I couldn't quite think of how to do it. I was doing research for a chapter book we're working on. In that chapter book, I was looking at another picture book, and it gave me the idea of how to format my book. So reading gives you ideas, whether it's just from a format standpoint or concepts, but it's very important for you to be able to do that. The other point, or the two more points, the next point is that you want to have a good support system. So there are things like SCBWI, which is the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. They've had some issues recently, but then, at the core, they do want to help you become a better writer. For example, I'm part of an organization, it used to be called Black Creators and Kidlit, recently changed their name to Black Creators HQ. And it's an organization that was started by some of these really sharp young Black folks about a year ago. And they brought in, different like authors and agents and publishers that normally you wouldn't have access to. And even from that time, they've grown it to where now we have like a pod system where you meet with folks to kind of build community. Wonderful. You still have the speakers that come in a couple of times during the month. And also you have different groups you get involved in terms of, like, let's say, critique groups. So you want to have that support system in place. And the last point is kind of tied to what Chad said is you have to persist. You're going to have times when you send out a submission and you get back a rejection letter. Okay. And then keep going. If you believe in what you've written, there's someone out there who's going to get behind you and will do the same thing or feel the same way about your book and help you bring it to market. So persist.
So wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, gosh, this is an hour so well spent, it feels like.
It flew by.
I know.
We wish we could keep you here. It'd be also so nice to meet you in person at some point when conditions allow for it. So please consider, people get ready, a home away from home for family reunion and for you all and your extended family. Dee, any closing words?
Well, we just always say here at People Get Ready that, the work we do is not just transactional. We are really happy to have you as like a part of our soul family. Because
thank you very much.
As you move into your career and you move into like the work or the service that you're doing in the world, just like you are and we are, you find your soul family. And so we're really glad to have you all as a part of our community. And we really do hope to be able to meet you in person someday. And I just give you all the credit for like keeping love strong in your family and keeping the traditions alive for the children and for the adults, but like to teach them, to model for them what family is all about is a really beautiful thing. So thank you for the story and for your relationship.
Yeah.
Sharing
and your example.
that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
Yep. Thank you for having us.
And in the spirit
Sarge, we said hi.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say two things. Dee took it out of my mouth. In the spirit of Soul Family, please give our best to Sarge. And also, we would be remiss if we didn't just end by saying, we hope those folks who are watching will kind of keep an eye out for future podcasts from us and also for future projects from Chad and Dad. And then in addition to that, you know, we have on the horizon here in New Haven, the Elm City Lit Fest, which is helmed by our dear friend, Ife Michelle Gardine. And we know it's going to be beautiful. It's September 11th and 12th. It's a celebration of the literary arts of the African diaspora. And there are tons of in-person and virtual events that will happen over those 2 days, some of which we will just provide some space for. And we hope that you all will keep an eye out for that, tune in and support, and come and see us at the book space when you can. Thanks so much, everybody, for being here.
And stay well. We wish you
well.
good health.
Bye.
Bye.